The ballroom fell silent. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Amanda, the bride in her pristine white gown, pointed a manicured finger at the man standing by the buffet table. Her voice sliced through the air, high-pitched and trembling with anger. "Check his pockets. He stole my bracelet." The accused, a tall, dignified black man in a tailored suit, stood frozen. His brows furrowed in confusion as all eyes turned toward him. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Amanda's theatrical rage. "I beg your pardon," he said evenly, his baritone voice carrying across the room. "Don't play dumb," Amanda hissed, stepping closer to him, her veil trailing like a shadow of her accusations. "That bracelet is worth more than your entire wardrobe. I saw you near the table where I left it. Now it's gone." A murmur of unease spread through the guests, and Amanda's husband, James, a pale-faced man with nervous energy, hurried to her side. "Amanda," James whispered, his hand on her arm. "Maybe we should." "No," she snapped, cutting him off. "This is my wedding, and I will not let some stranger ruin it." The room was suffocating with tension. The accused man, who introduced himself earlier as Mr. Paul Carter, glanced around at the sea of judgmental faces. Calmly, he raised his hands. "If you insist, Mrs. Cartwright," he said, his voice measured, "I'll empty my pockets." Amanda's eyes gleamed with smug triumph as Paul slowly reached into his suit pockets, one at a time, and pulled out nothing but a neatly folded handkerchief and a sleek phone. He turned the pockets inside out for all to see. "I believe I'm still innocent until proven guilty," Paul said, locking eyes with Amanda. Amanda faltered but quickly doubled down. "You must have hidden it somewhere. I know you took it." Before anyone could respond, an elderly guest cleared her throat loudly. She held up a sparkling bracelet. "Amanda, dear, is this the bracelet you're talking about?" "I found it by the cake table." The crowd collectively exhaled, but Amanda's face flushed crimson. She stumbled over her words, her indignation morphing into embarrassment. I didn't mean." Paul interrupted, his voice cutting through the awkward silence like a knife. "It's funny how quickly people jump to conclusions, isn't it?" His words hung heavy in the air, each one a deliberate weight. The room buzzed with whispered conversations, but before anyone could defuse the situation, Paul delivered the final blow. "By the way," he said, sliding his phone into his pocket, "for those who don't know, I'm the CEO of Cartwright Industries, the company where James works. I was invited here as a gesture of goodwill." He glanced at Amanda, his expression unreadable. "But I see now that goodwill isn't always mutual." Amanda's gasp echoed through the room as her jaw dropped. The stunned silence stretched on as the full weight of Paul's words sank in. "Now," Paul continued, stepping forward, "should we continue with the celebration? Or would you like to accuse me of something else?" The question hung heavy in the air as Paul's gaze lingered on Amanda, whose face betrayed a mix of shock and panic. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the muffled clink of champagne glasses being nervously set down on nearby tables. Amanda's face remained frozen in disbelief, her complexion pale as the weight of Paul's revelation settled over her. James looked just as stunned, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Mr. Carter, we had no idea you were," James stammered, his voice cracking under the pressure. Paul held up a hand, cutting him off. "Spare me the apologies, James. This isn't about me. It's about her." He pointed at Amanda, whose lips quivered as she tried to form a response. Amanda finally found her voice, though it came out as more of a squeak. I didn't mean it like that. It was a misunderstanding." Paul's gaze was unwavering. "A misunderstanding? Let's call it what it is. You saw a black man at your wedding, decided he didn't belong, and jumped to the worst possible conclusion. This wasn't about the bracelet, Amanda. This was about your prejudice." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, some looking at Amanda with judgment, others at Paul with newfound respect or discomfort. "I didn't mean," Amanda tried again, her voice breaking, but Paul's commanding presence silenced her. "I've dealt with people like you my entire life," he continued, his tone calm but sharp. "People who see my skin color before they see my character, who assume I must be a criminal or someone beneath them. It's exhausting, Amanda. And tonight, you showed everyone here exactly who you are." James stepped in, his voice pleading. "Paul, please, let's not make a scene. This is supposed to be a happy day." Paul's sharp laugh interrupted him. "A happy day? For who, James? Your wife just tried to humiliate me in front of everyone, and now that her story has fallen apart, you want to sweep it under the rug." The tension was unbearable, and the guests began to murmur louder. Some started to quietly leave, uncomfortable with the escalating confrontation. An older man, one of Paul's close associates who had accompanied him to the wedding, stepped forward. "Paul," he said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder, "you've made your point. Maybe it's time we left." Paul sighed, his gaze still locked on Amanda. "You're right, Richard. This isn't worth ruining my evening any further." He turned to the room, addressing the crowd with a calm authority that commanded respect. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disturbance tonight. I was invited here as a guest, but clearly, not everyone here values that. I'll take my leave now. Congratulations to the happy couple." His words dripped with sarcasm as he gave Amanda and James a pointed look. With that, Paul turned and began walking toward the exit, Richard and a few other colleagues following close behind. But just as he reached the door, Amanda's voice rang out. "Wait!" she cried, desperation evident in her tone. Paul stopped but didn't turn around. He waited, giving her the opportunity to speak, but her words caught in her throat. The room watched with bated breath as the bride, still in her white gown, stumbled over an apology that never quite came. Finally, Paul glanced over his shoulder. "You have nothing to say? Then neither do I." And with that, he walked out, leaving a stunned crowd and a humiliated bride behind him. Back inside the ballroom, Amanda collapsed into a chair, her head in her hands. James knelt beside her, whispering frantically, but she swatted him away. The reality of what had just happened began to sink in, and the whispers of the guests around her were impossible to ignore. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Amanda muttered under her breath, though whether she was talking to James, herself, or the universe was unclear. James looked at her, his expression a mix of disappointment and fear. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" he asked quietly. Amanda didn't answer. Meanwhile, outside the venue, Paul stood by his car, taking a deep breath. Richard placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You handled that well," Richard said. Paul chuckled bitterly. "Handled it well? I've been handling situations like that my entire life. It's exhausting, Richard. It never ends." Richard nodded solemnly. "But you made your point. And now, they'll have to live with what they've done." Paul looked back at the venue, his gaze distant. "It's not about making a point, Richard. It's about changing the way people think. And tonight, I don't think I changed anything." Back in the ballroom, James was making frantic phone calls, trying to salvage the evening, while Amanda sat in silence, her mind racing. She had no idea that the fallout from her actions had only just begun. The morning after the wedding, Amanda sat in the grand kitchen of her newly purchased home, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped nervously against the ceramic mug. James paced back and forth across the marble floor, his phone pressed to his ear. "I understand, Mr. Carter," James said into the phone, his tone both apologetic and desperate. "It was a huge misunderstanding, and Amanda deeply regrets her actions." Amanda shot him a look but didn't say anything. She had spent the entire night replaying the events in her mind. Every time she thought about the look on Paul Carter's face, a pang of guilt twisted in her stomach. James hung up, his face pale. "Well?" Amanda asked, her voice trembling. "He's not pressing charges," James said, sinking into the chair across from her. Amanda let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "But," James continued, his tone grim, "he's furious, Amanda. He's humiliated, and he has every right to be." Amanda's relief quickly turned into a wave of defensiveness. "I said it was a misunderstanding. Why can't people let it go?" James slammed his hand on the table, startling her. "Because it's not that simple, Amanda. You accused him of theft at our wedding. In front of everyone." Amanda flinched but remained defiant. "I thought he took it. How was I supposed to know he was rich, powerful, the CEO of my company?" James cut her off, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You didn't care who he was. You saw a black man and assumed the worst. And now, my entire career is hanging by a thread because of your misunderstanding." Amanda opened her mouth to argue, but James didn't give her the chance. "Do you know what he said to me on the phone just now? He said he doesn't make a habit of employing people whose spouses reflect poorly on his company's values." Amanda's heart sank. "He wouldn't fire you over this, would he?" James buried his face in his hands. "I don't know, Amanda. But even if he doesn't, my reputation is already damaged. Do you think people at the office won't hear about this?" The weight of his words finally began to sink in. Amanda stared at her coffee, her appetite gone. Meanwhile, across town, Paul Carter sat in his office, the skyline of New York City sprawling behind him. His assistant, Sarah, handed him a folder filled with reports. "Mr. Carter," she said cautiously, "the incident from last night is starting to circulate on social media. A few of the guests posted about it." Paul sighed, rubbing his temples. "Of course they did." Sarah hesitated. "What do you want me to do about it?" Paul thought for a moment. "Nothing. Let it run its course. The truth will speak for itself." Sarah nodded but lingered by the door. "If I may, sir, you handled it with a lot of grace. More than most people would." Paul gave her a faint smile. "Thanks, Sarah. But grace doesn't change the fact that people like Amanda Cartwright are everywhere. She's just one of many." Sarah nodded, understanding the deeper frustration behind his words. "Still, the way you stood up for yourself, it's inspiring." Paul leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Inspiring or not, it doesn't change the fact that this keeps happening. And the worst part is, people like her don't even realize the damage they're doing until it's too late." Back at the Cartwrights' home, James's phone buzzed incessantly. He glanced at the screen and groaned. "It's my boss," he muttered. "Answer it," Amanda urged. James shot her a look before swiping to answer the call. "Hello, Mr. Carter," he said, his voice tight. Amanda watched him anxiously as the conversation unfolded. James's face went from pale to ashen, his free hand gripping the edge of the table. "Yes, sir. I understand. Yes, I'll make arrangements immediately. Thank you for the opportunity." When he hung up, Amanda's voice was barely above a whisper. "What did he say?" James stared at her, his expression a mixture of anger and despair. "He's transferring me to the branch in Idaho. Effective immediately." Amanda's jaw dropped. "Idaho? But we just bought this house. Do you think that matters right now?" James snapped. "This is the only way I get to keep my job. Paul is making it very clear that he doesn't want me anywhere near corporate headquarters." Amanda felt her world crumble. She had always dreamed of the high society life in New York, and now it was slipping away because of one mistake. "This isn't fair," she muttered. James laughed bitterly. "Fair? Do you even hear yourself? After what you did, we're lucky he didn't fire me outright." That night, as Amanda lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the image of Paul Carter's face when she accused him. For the first time, she began to question not just her actions but the beliefs that had led her to make them. Had she really seen Paul as a person? Or had she seen only a stereotype? She rolled over, trying to push the thoughts away, but sleep didn't come. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of upheaval for Amanda and James. Their sleek Manhattan apartment was packed into moving boxes, the furniture sold off to prepare for their abrupt relocation to Idaho. Amanda tried to process the reality of what was happening, but every time she looked around at the dismantled life they had built, guilt gnawed at her insides. James had become distant, throwing himself into preparations for his new position. Their conversations were curt and practical, about logistics, finances, and the sale of their apartment. Any mention of the wedding incident or Paul Carter was avoided like the plague. But Amanda couldn't avoid it entirely. The incident had gone viral. Posts about the racist bride circulated on social media, with snippets of videos and detailed accounts from guests. Though none of the posts mentioned her name outright, those in their social circle knew exactly who the stories were about. Amanda found herself unfollowed, uninvited, and unwelcome among her peers. "I can't believe this is happening," Amanda whispered one evening as she scrolled through her phone, her face illuminated by the harsh glow of the screen. James glanced at her from across the room. his expression unreadable. "What did you expect?" he said flatly. "I didn't think it would blow up like this," she muttered. "That's the problem, Amanda," James said, setting down the box he was packing. "You never think about the consequences of your actions until it's too late." His words stung, but Amanda couldn't argue. The move to Idaho was as jarring as Amanda had feared. Gone were the glittering lights of Manhattan, replaced by a quiet suburban neighborhood where the biggest excitement was the weekly farmers market. Their new house was modest, with none of the grandeur Amanda was used to. James dove headfirst into his new role at the Idaho branch, leaving Amanda alone with her thoughts most of the time. She spent her days aimlessly scrolling through social media, where the posts about the wedding were still making rounds. One day, Amanda's curiosity got the better of her. She typed Paul Carter's name into the search bar. Articles about him flooded her screen. Paul Carter, the trailblazing CEO changing the corporate world. From humble beginnings to the top, the inspiring journey of Paul Carter. How Paul Carter's leadership is reshaping workplace diversity. Amanda read each article, feeling a mixture of admiration and shame. The more she learned about Paul, the worse she felt. He wasn't just some wealthy CEO. He was a self-made man who had overcome countless obstacles to get where he was. And she had tried to tear him down in a single night. A week later, Amanda found herself sitting in the local coffee shop, scrolling through her phone as she sipped a latte. She noticed a familiar face in a group photo on her feed, Paul Carter. Her heart raced as she read the caption. He was hosting a community event in a nearby city, promoting diversity in the workplace. Amanda stared at the screen, her thoughts spinning. The idea of seeing him again filled her with dread, but a small voice in her head whispered that it might be her chance to make things right. The following Saturday, Amanda found herself standing outside a bustling convention center. Her palms were sweaty, and her stomach churned with nerves. She had no idea what she was going to say, but she knew she couldn't let the opportunity pass. Inside, the atmosphere was lively, with booths and banners showcasing various initiatives and programs. Amanda spotted Paul almost immediately. He was standing near a stage, deep in conversation with a group of attendees. Taking a deep breath, she made her way toward him. "Mr. Carter," she said softly, her voice trembling. Paul turned, his eyes narrowing slightly when he saw her. He said nothing, waiting for her to speak. Amanda swallowed hard. I don't know if you remember me," she began. "I remember you," Paul said, his tone even but cold. The weight of his words made Amanda falter, but she pressed on. "I came here to apologize. What I did at the wedding was unforgivable. I made assumptions, and I acted on them without thinking. I was wrong, and I'm so sorry." Paul studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Why are you apologizing now?" he asked. Amanda hesitated. "Because I've had time to reflect, and I realize how much harm I caused. Not just to you, but to everyone who saw what happened. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say it." Paul's gaze softened slightly, though his tone remained firm. "You're right, you don't deserve forgiveness. What you did wasn't just a personal insult, it was a reflection of a deeper problem. People like me spend our entire lives fighting against the kind of prejudice you showed that night." Amanda nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I know, and I want to do better. I don't know how yet, but I want to learn." Paul regarded her silently for a long moment before finally speaking. "Actions speak louder than words, Mrs. Cartwright. If you're serious about changing, prove it." With that, he turned back to his conversation, leaving Amanda standing there, feeling both humbled and hopeful. That evening, Amanda returned home and opened her laptop. She didn't know where to start, but she began researching ways to educate herself about racial bias and privilege. For the first time, she felt a spark of determination to become a better person, not for anyone else's approval, but because it was the right thing to do. The weeks following Amanda's encounter with Paul Carter were a whirlwind of self-reflection and action. She immersed herself in books, documentaries, and online workshops about racism, privilege, and unconscious bias. Each piece of information chipped away at her ignorance, leaving her feeling both horrified by her past mindset and hopeful for change. Amanda also began volunteering at a local community center in Idaho, helping with initiatives that supported underprivileged families. Though it was a small step, it was the first time she had done something purely for others, and the experience was humbling. James, however, remained skeptical. He watched Amanda's transformation from a distance, unsure whether it was genuine or an act of guilt. "You're really diving into this, aren't you?" he remarked one evening as he walked into the living room and found her surrounded by notes and books. Amanda looked up, her expression serious. "I have to, James. I've been blind to so much for so long. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make sure it never happens again." James sighed, sitting beside her. "I'm glad you're taking this seriously, but I don't think Paul Carter will ever forgive you. You know that, right?" Amanda nodded, her gaze steady. "This isn't about his forgiveness. It's about doing what's right." One evening, while scrolling through social media, Amanda stumbled upon an announcement. Paul Carter was hosting a virtual panel discussion about diversity and inclusion in corporate America. Without hesitation, she registered for the event. The day of the panel, Amanda sat at her laptop, notebook in hand, ready to listen and learn. Paul was the final speaker, and as he appeared on screen, Amanda's chest tightened. Paul's keynote was both inspiring and sobering. He spoke about his journey, the obstacles he had faced, and the importance of holding people accountable while also allowing space for growth. "I've always believed in giving people the opportunity to change," Paul said, his voice firm but compassionate. "But change has to be earned. It's not enough to say the right words or make promises. It's about actions, consistent, meaningful actions." Amanda felt as though he was speaking directly to her. After the panel, Amanda decided to email Paul. She spent hours crafting the message, pouring her heart into every word. Subject: "Thank you. Dear Mr. Carter, I attended your panel discussion today, and I wanted to thank you for sharing your experiences and insights. Your words deeply resonated with me, especially your point about actions speaking louder than words. I know I have a long way to go, but I've been taking steps to educate myself and make a difference in my community. I've started volunteering at a local center and participating in workshops about racial bias. These are small steps, but they are steps nonetheless. I don't expect forgiveness, nor am I seeking validation. I just wanted to let you know that your words have had an impact, and I'm committed to doing better, not just for myself but for the people around me. Thank you for being a voice of change. Sincerely, Amanda Cartwright." She hesitated before hitting send, wondering if Paul would even read it. But she reminded herself that this wasn't about his response, it was about taking responsibility. A week later, Amanda received a reply. Her heart pounded as she opened the email. Subject: "Thank you. Amanda, thank you for reaching out and for taking the time to reflect on your actions. Change is a journey, and while it's encouraging to hear that you've started taking steps, the real test will be in your consistency. If you're serious about making a difference, keep doing the work, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. And remember, this isn't about proving anything to me, it's about proving it to yourself and the people you encounter in your life. Best, Paul Carter." Amanda exhaled, her chest feeling lighter. Paul's response wasn't overly warm, but it wasn't dismissive either. It was a reminder that redemption wasn't a destination, it was a continuous process. Amanda decided to share her journey publicly. She started a blog documenting her experiences, from her volunteer work to the lessons she was learning about privilege and bias. Though it was terrifying to open herself up to scrutiny, she felt it was important to be honest about her mistakes and her efforts to change. Her first post was titled, "I Was the Problem, and Here's How I'm Working to Fix It." To her surprise, the post resonated with many readers. Some shared their own stories of growth, while others challenged her to dig deeper. Amanda welcomed the dialogue, knowing that every conversation brought her closer to understanding. At the community center, Amanda began forming genuine connections with the people she worked with. One day, a young girl named Mia handed her a drawing she had made. "It's you," Mia said, pointing at the figure in the picture. Amanda smiled, her eyes misting over. "Thank you, Mia. This means so much to me." As she looked at the drawing, Amanda felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. For the first time in her life, she was focused on something bigger than herself. What do you think of Amanda's efforts so far? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to confront your own biases? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Amanda's blog gained traction quickly, far beyond what she had anticipated. Her posts began to circulate on social media, and the feedback was a mix of encouragement, skepticism, and criticism. Each comment, whether positive or negative, pushed her to reflect more deeply on her actions and motivations. One morning, as she was preparing to write a new entry, Amanda received a direct message on her blog. It was from someone she didn't expect. Subject: a thoughtful step. Amanda, I've been following your blog for the past few weeks. At first, I was skeptical. Many people talk about change but fail to follow through. However, I've seen the effort you're putting into educating yourself and engaging with others in meaningful ways. If you're interested, I'd like to invite you to a panel discussion I'm hosting next month. The theme is Accountability and Redemption in Today's Society. I believe your story could provide a unique perspective, and it may inspire others to reflect on their own actions. Let me know if you're interested. Best regards, Paul Carter. Amanda reread the message multiple times, her heart racing. Paul Carter was not only watching her progress but was also willing to give her a platform to share her journey. Later that evening, Amanda told James about the invitation. Paul wants me to speak on a panel he's hosting, she said, her voice tinged with both excitement and nervousness. James looked up from his laptop, his brow furrowed. Are you sure you're ready for that? It's one thing to write about your journey online, but speaking in front of an audience, that's a whole different level. I know, Amanda admitted, but I feel like this is an opportunity to show that I'm serious about changing. If I can share my story and help even one person rethink their actions, it's worth it. James sighed, leaning back in his chair. I just hope you're prepared for the backlash. Not everyone is going to believe you've changed, no matter what you say or do. Amanda nodded, understanding his concern. I'm not doing this to convince anyone. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. The day of the panel arrived quickly. Amanda stood backstage at the event venue, her hands clammy and her heart pounding. She had spent weeks preparing her speech, but the fear of public judgment loomed large. When Paul arrived, Amanda braced herself. It was the first time they had seen each other in person since the wedding. Mr. Carter, she said, extending her hand. Paul shook her hand firmly, his expression neutral. Amanda, thank you for accepting the invitation. Thank you for giving me this chance, she said earnestly. Paul nodded, his gaze steady. This isn't an easy road you've chosen, but it's a necessary one. Just remember, this isn't about you. It's about the message. Those words stayed with Amanda as she stepped onto the stage. The auditorium was packed, and the lights felt blinding. Amanda took her seat alongside the other panelists, feeling the weight of every gaze on her. Paul introduced each speaker, his commanding presence setting the tone for the discussion. When it was Amanda's turn to speak, she took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone. Good afternoon, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. My name is Amanda Cartwright, and I'm here today because I made a terrible mistake. But more importantly, I'm here because I've committed myself to learning from that mistake and becoming a better person. She went on to recount the events of her wedding, the assumptions she had made about Paul, and the fallout that had followed. She didn't sugarcoat anything, openly admitting her guilt and the privilege that had blinded her to her own biases. I realized that racism isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes, it's in the subtle ways we judge others without even realizing it. I didn't think of myself as a racist, but my actions told a different story. And when I saw the pain I had caused, I knew I had to change. The room was silent as Amanda finished her speech, her voice thick with emotion. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to show that change is possible when we're willing to face our flaws and do the hard work of unlearning them. It's a lifelong journey, but it's one we all need to take. After the panel, Amanda was approached by several audience members who thanked her for sharing her story. Many shared their own experiences, creating moments of connection and understanding that Amanda hadn't anticipated. Paul approached her as the event wound down, his expression unreadable. You did well, he said simply. Thank you, Amanda replied, her voice tinged with relief. Paul nodded, his tone softening slightly. Keep doing the work, Amanda. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning. As Paul walked away, Amanda felt a sense of resolve settle over her. For the first time, she believed she could truly make a difference, not just for herself, but for others as well. What would you have done in Amanda's position? Do you believe people can truly change? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Amanda's speech at the panel marked a turning point, not only in her personal journey but also in how others perceived her efforts. While she received praise from some for her honesty and vulnerability, the backlash she had feared was just as loud. Online forums and social media posts picked apart her words, with some accusing her of using the platform for redemption and others questioning her sincerity. "She's just trying to clean up her image," one commenter wrote. "People like her don't change overnight," another said. Amanda read every word, taking the criticism to heart. But instead of letting it discourage her, she used it as fuel to keep moving forward. "If they think I'm insincere," she told James one evening, "then I need to work even harder to show that I'm not. Change isn't about convincing people, it's about living differently." James nodded, his skepticism giving way to admiration. For the first time in months, he could see that Amanda's transformation wasn't just a phase. In the weeks following the panel, Amanda began collaborating with organizations dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion. She used her blog to amplify the voices of those who had experienced racism firsthand, sharing stories that needed to be heard. One day, Amanda received an email that left her speechless. Subject: "Let's talk. Dear Amanda, I wanted to reach out after hearing about the work you've been doing. Your story has sparked conversations in circles I didn't expect, and I think there's potential for us to collaborate on a larger scale. If you're interested, let's set up a time to discuss. Bess. Paul Carter." Amanda stared at the email, her hands trembling. Paul Carter, a man she had once humiliated in front of a room full of people, was offering her an opportunity to work with him. The meeting was set for the following week at Paul's corporate office in Manhattan. As Amanda walked through the towering glass doors of the building, memories of her former life in the city flooded back. But this time, she wasn't here as a socialite or a bride. She was here to prove that she had changed. Paul's assistant greeted her warmly and led her to his office. The space was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city skyline. Paul stood as Amanda entered, extending a hand. "Amanda, thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me," she said, shaking his hand. They sat across from each other, the tension between them noticeably lighter than before. "I've been following your blog," Paul began. "You've made significant progress, and I can see that you're committed to this work. That's why I wanted to talk to you about a project we're launching." He explained that his company was creating a nationwide initiative to promote diversity and address bias in the workplace. The program would include workshops, mentorship opportunities, and community outreach events. "We're looking for people who can share authentic stories, people who've made mistakes, learn from them, and are working to be better," Paul said. "Your story could inspire others to reflect on their own biases." Amanda listened intently, her mind racing. The opportunity was daunting but also incredibly meaningful. "I'd be honored to be part of this," she said finally. Paul nodded, his expression serious. "This isn't just about telling your story, Amanda. It's about being a part of a movement. Are you ready for that?" Amanda met his gaze. "I am." Over the next few months, Amanda became deeply involved in the initiative. She traveled to different cities, speaking at events and participating in workshops. She met people from all walks of life, each with their own stories of struggle and resilience. One evening, after a particularly moving event in Atlanta, Amanda sat with Paul at a quiet cafe. "I never thought I'd be doing this," she admitted. "If you had told me a year ago that I'd be working alongside you, I wouldn't have believed it." Paul smiled faintly. "Life has a way of surprising us. But this isn't about me or you, Amanda. It's about the people we're reaching." Amanda nodded, sipping her tea. "I've learned so much from this journey. And I know I still have a long way to go." Paul's expression softened. "The fact that you know that says a lot. Change isn't about perfection, it's about progress." The next morning, Amanda woke up to a flood of messages on her phone. Her latest blog post, which recounted her first event with the initiative, had gone viral. Messages of support and gratitude poured in from strangers who had connected with her story. But one message stood out, a simple note from a young woman in Tennessee. "Your story gave me the courage to confront my own biases. Thank you for being honest about your journey. You've inspired me to start mine." Amanda read the message twice, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time, She truly understood the ripple effect of her actions. Do you believe people like Amanda can truly make a difference? Have you ever been inspired by someone's journey of growth? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more impactful stories like this. Months turned into a year, and Amanda's life had transformed in ways she never imagined. The initiative she had joined with Paul Carter became a nationwide success, garnering media attention and inspiring countless individuals to confront their own biases. Amanda had gone from being the racist bride whispered about on social media to a vocal advocate for equity and understanding. Despite her progress, Amanda knew her journey was far from over. Each day brought new challenges, lessons, and moments of self-reflection. She often reminded herself of Paul's words, "Change isn't about perfection, it's about progress." One day, Amanda was invited to an awards gala in New York City. The event honored individuals who had made significant contributions to diversity and inclusion. To her surprise, Paul Carter had nominated her for the Trailblazer Award, recognizing her commitment to personal growth and her work in spreading awareness. As Amanda walked into the grand ballroom, she felt a strange mix of pride and humility. The last time she had been in such a setting was her wedding, the night that had changed her life forever. When it was her turn to speak, Amanda stood at the podium, looking out at the audience. She took a deep breath and began. "Thank you for this incredible honor. A little over a year ago, I wouldn't have believed I would be standing here. In fact, I wouldn't have believed I deserved to be here." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I'm here because I made a mistake. A terrible mistake that forced me to confront the kind of person I was and the kind of person I wanted to be. That mistake could have defined me. But instead, it became the catalyst for change, not just in my life, but in the lives of those I've had the privilege to meet through this journey." Amanda's voice wavered slightly, but she steadied herself. "I've learned that change is never easy, and it's never perfect. It requires humility, accountability, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But most of all, it requires action. Words alone don't create change, our actions do." She smiled, her gaze finding Paul in the crowd. "I owe a great deal of gratitude to Paul Carter for holding me accountable and for believing that even someone like me, someone who made a grave mistake, could change." The audience erupted into applause, and Amanda stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed with emotion. After the event, Paul approached her, a rare smile gracing his usually serious demeanor. "You've come a long way, Amanda," he said. "Thanks to you," she replied. Paul shook his head. "No, thanks to you. I gave you the opportunity, but you're the one who chose to take it. You're the one who did the work." Amanda felt a lump in her throat as she nodded. "I'll keep doing the work. For the rest of my life." Paul extended his hand, and Amanda shook it firmly, their shared respect evident in the gesture. The next morning, Amanda returned to her blog, where she wrote her final post about the journey that had brought her to this point. Title: A Life Rewritten. She wrote about her mistakes, her growth, and her commitment to continuing the work of self-reflection and advocacy. But most importantly, she wrote about hope, the hope that anyone, no matter their past, could choose a better path. As she hit publish, Amanda felt a deep sense of peace. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she was ready to face it with an open heart and an unwavering resolve to do better. Have you ever experienced a moment that changed your life forever? What steps have you taken to grow and learn from it? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of transformation and hope.